Evelyn Barrett to Human Resources, immediately. The announcement echoed through the intercom system of the distribution center, cutting through the ambient noise of forklifts and packaging machines like an icy blade. I felt every eye in the facility turn toward me as I stood frozen beside the logistics terminal, my fingers still hovering over the keyboard where I'd been resolving this morning's shipping crisis. 27 years at Northbridge Supply Co. had taught me to recognize trouble. This wasn't a casual summons. I smoothed down my navy pantsuit, the same one I'd worn to my promotion interview when I became Operations Systems Director 12 years ago, and made the long walk across the warehouse floor. Workers I'd hired, trained, and mentored over decades avoided my gaze as I passed. They knew something I didn't. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to my own execution. The polished hallway stretched before me, ending at the HR director's gleaming wooden door. I had no way of knowing that walking through it would end nearly 3 decades of dedicated service. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just a manager. I was the architect of the system they relied on. And it still listened to me more than it did to them. Cost optimization. That's what Regina Fletcher, our HR director, called it. Her perfectly manicured nails slid a termination letter across the desk while she avoided meeting my eyes. The board has approved a restructuring initiative, she recited, as if reading from a script. Your position has been identified as redundant. I didn't react, not outwardly, but inside, something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. Redundant, I repeated, after 27 years. Regina shifted uncomfortably. Your contributions have been valuable, Evelyn, but the company needs to evolve. We're bringing in fresh perspectives more aligned with our digital transformation goals. Fresh perspectives, I echoed. You mean younger and cheaper. Regina's smile tightened. We've hired 2 recent graduates from MIT's supply chain program. They'll be splitting your responsibilities, bringing cutting-edge approaches to our operations. She pushed another document forward, a severance package. We're offering 6 months' salary, which is generous considering... Considering what? That I've dedicated my entire career to building this company's reputation for reliability? She cleared her throat. The transition begins immediately. Your replacements are already being onboarded. I glanced down at the termination letter, noticing something Regina probably thought I'd miss. The document had been hastily modified, with my name clearly written over a correction fluid spot. I wasn't the first target, just the one they'd settled on at the last minute. As if on cue, the door opened, and CEO Martin Geller entered with 2 20-somethings trailing behind him. The young man wore an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his lanky frame. The woman had immaculately styled hair and the confident smile of someone who'd never experienced failure. Ah, Evelyn, good, you're here. Martin clapped his hands together, the picture of false enthusiasm. I'd like you to meet Aiden Whitmore and Madison Reynolds, Maddie, as she prefers. They're going to be bringing Northbridge into the modern era. Aiden stepped forward, hand extended. It's an honor, Ms. Barrett. Your logistics algorithms are legendary in the field. His smile seemed practiced, his eyes calculating, more style than substance. Madison, Maddie, was filming the interaction on her phone. This is such an inspiring moment. Mind if I get a quick TikTok for my professional brand? I document transformative business journeys. I didn't take Aiden's hand. Instead, I looked directly at Martin. Am I expected to train my replacements before I leave? Martin's smile faltered. That won't be necessary. Aiden and Maddie are fully versed in contemporary supply chain management. They've already proposed several efficiency improvements. I raised an eyebrow. Such as? Well, Aiden jumped in eagerly. We're implementing an AI-driven route optimization that should cut fuel costs by 22% in the first quarter alone. I almost laughed. You mean Sentinel? The system I designed and implemented 3 years ago that's already saved us millions? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Madison lowered her phone. Well, Martin recovered. They'll be expanding on your foundations with modern approaches. The severance package is quite generous. Evelyn, 6 months salary, health benefits through the end of the year. And in exchange, you get 2 employees for the price of 1.8 of me. I finished, saving the company approximately $3,100 per month in salary and benefits. That's the calculation, isn't it? Regina and Martin exchanged glances. I'd hit the target. Your personal belongings will be packed and sent to your home address. Regina said briskly, company policy requires immediate departure for senior management transitions. No farewell party, no thank you. Not even a chance to say goodbye to people I'd worked alongside for decades. Just a box of belongings delivered by courier, as if I were being erased. As I was escorted out by security, a final indignity, I caught a glimpse of Aiden and Maddie taking selfies in front of the main control panel. The same control panel whose operations manual I'd handwritten during the pandemic when our systems documentation was lost in a server crash. I walked to my car with my head held high, ignoring the pitying glances from colleagues watching through windows. Only when I was safely inside did I allow myself a moment of raw emotion, not tears, but white-hot anger that made my hands shake on the steering wheel. They thought they were saving $3,100 a month. They had no idea what the true cost would be. People like Martin Geller never understood what made Northbridge Supply Co. successful. They saw numbers on spreadsheets, quarterly projections, and market share percentages. What they didn't see was the intricate, living organism that was our logistics operation, an ecosystem I had carefully cultivated for nearly 3 decades. My official title was Operations Systems Director, but what I had actually built was something far more valuable: Sentinel. Sentinel wasn't just another supply chain management system. It was an advanced AI that I had developed from the ground up, starting as a simple routing program and evolving into a comprehensive operations intelligence network. It monitored shipment routes in real time, analyzed risk factors ranging from weather patterns to driver behavior, and made thousands of micro-adjustments daily to ensure our deliveries arrived safely and on time. When I first proposed the concept to the executive team 7 years ago, they laughed. We don't need fancy algorithms, Martin had said dismissively. Our manual processes work fine. But I persisted, building Sentinel on nights and weekends, testing small modules during off-peak hours until I had enough data to prove its value. Within 6 months of full implementation, Sentinel had reduced our delivery exceptions by 64% and cut fuel costs by 28%. Suddenly, Martin wasn't laughing anymore. Instead, he was showcasing our proprietary AI-driven logistics platform in meetings with government clients, calling it Northbridge's secret weapon in securing high-security delivery contracts for medical supplies, military equipment, and other sensitive cargo. What Martin and the board never fully grasped was that Sentinel wasn't just code. It was an extension of my institutional knowledge, my understanding of the industry's complexities. I had programmed it with every contingency plan I developed over decades, every lesson learned from crises navigated, every relationship built with suppliers, drivers, and clients. And I had built in one more thing: Failsafe 9. It wasn't sabotage. I was too professional for that. But I wasn't naive either. In an industry where corporate raiders frequently gutted companies for short-term profits, I had created a protection mechanism. If I didn't log into the administrator portal for 72 hours, Sentinel would automatically generate comprehensive reports of any operational anomalies and send them directly to our top clients, including the Federal Medical Transport Agency, which relied on us for critical medication deliveries. As I drove home from Northbridge for the last time, I knew the countdown had begun. 72 hours until Failsafe 9 activated. I wasn't going to interfere. I wasn't going to accelerate the process. I was simply going to wait and watch as my replacements learned a costly lesson about valuing experience. 3 days. That's all it would take for them to discover that the $3,100 monthly savings came with a much higher price tag. My sister Alice called that evening. She'd retired last year from her position as a university professor and had been encouraging me to do the same. They did you a favor, Evie, she insisted when I told her what happened. You've been talking about retirement for years. That's not the point, I said, staring out my kitchen window at the garden I rarely had time to tend. I wasn't ready to be discarded like obsolete equipment. So what are you going to do? Sue them? I sipped my tea, contemplating the notification on my phone. 68 hours until failsafe 9 activation. Nothing, I replied. Absolutely nothing. Alice knew me too well to believe that. Evelyn Barrett doesn't just roll over and accept defeat. What are you planning? I'm not planning anything. I'm just going to let nature take its course. Meaning some lessons have to be learned the hard way. I changed the subject. How's your garden coming along? After hanging up, I opened my laptop and accessed a secure server where I kept a shadow copy of Sentinel's monitoring protocols. I hadn't built this backdoor for sabotage. It was a development environment I used for testing updates before implementing them in the live system. But it allowed me to watch Sentinel's logs without actually logging into the company system. Already, there were warning flags. Aiden had attempted to modify the cold chain delivery routes, presumably to optimize them according to whatever theoretical models he'd studied. Sentinel had flagged the changes as potentially disruptive to temperature-controlled deliveries, but had allowed the override with Aiden's credentials. I closed the laptop. This wasn't my problem anymore. I'd spent 27 years solving crises for Northbridge. Now they had fresh perspectives to handle things. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Barrett, this is Kyle from Dispatch. They gave us a new routing plan, but it's causing conflicts with the refrigeration cycles. The new manager said to follow the plan anyway. Should we? I stared at the message. Kyle was new. He didn't know I'd been terminated. For a moment, I considered responding, telling him to follow the established protocols in the manual. Instead, I blocked the number. Not my circus, not my monkeys. 67 hours to go. Day 1, after my termination dawned bright and clear. I slept in for the first time in decades, prepared a proper breakfast, and took my coffee onto the back porch. The suburban street behind my home was quiet, a stark contrast to the constant hum of activity I was accustomed to at the distribution center. My phone remained silent. My email inbox contained nothing but promotional newsletters and a confirmation of my severance package deposit. Northbridge was moving on without me, exactly as they'd planned. Until 2:17 p.m. when my personal phone rang again. Hello? Ms. Barrett? The voice was young, female, unfamiliar. This is Tara from customer service. I know you're not supposed to be bothered, but we have a situation with the veterans' meal delivery and nobody knows what to do. I should have hung up. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. What kind of situation? The frozen meals for the Veterans Affairs program, all 900 of them for today's delivery. They're registering temperature excursions. The drivers say the new route took them through areas without shade during peak heat hours, and the reefer units couldn't compensate. Quality control is rejecting the entire shipment. I closed my eyes, visualizing the route. Aiden had obviously rerouted the refrigerated trucks to save mileage, ignoring the fact that certain areas became heat traps during summer afternoons, something any experienced dispatcher would know to avoid. That's unfortunate, I said carefully. You should speak with Aiden or Madison. We tried. They're in back-to-back meetings with Martin all day. The VA coordinator is threatening to cancel the contract if we don't have a backup plan. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you have the emergency contingency plan? I did. It was in my head and programmed into Sentinel, but I wasn't going to share it. I'm no longer with the company. Tara, I can't help you. But, goodbye. I hung up, then checked my shadow monitoring system. Sentinel had already logged the temperature excursion as a critical event and automatically notified the Federal Medical Transport Agency, which oversaw our government contracts. The notification would include details of the route change that led to the failure. Strike 1. My phone rang again an hour later. I didn't answer, then again, and again. Eventually, I turned it off. When I checked my shadow monitor that evening, I saw a flurry of activity in the system. Emergency protocols had been activated, Local meal services had been contracted at premium rates to replace the spoiled deliveries, and multiple incident reports had been filed. The estimated cost of the single routing error, $142,000. Not a bad return on their $3,100 monthly savings. 52 hours until failsafe 9. Day 2 brought a winter storm warning. In my former role, I would have been at the facility by 5 a.m., reviewing contingency routes and ensuring high-priority deliveries were rescheduled ahead of the weather. Instead, I lingered over a second cup of coffee and watched snowflakes begin to fall outside my window. My shadow monitor showed no adjustments to the day's routes, despite the National Weather Service's upgraded warning. Either Aiden and Maddie weren't monitoring weather patterns, or they didn't understand the significance of the alert. By noon, the storm had intensified beyond forecasts. Roads were closing across 3 states, and my monitor showed 30 Northbridge trucks heading directly into areas under travel bans. I watched as Sentinel flagged the danger zones and suggested rerouting. But the system logs showed the warnings had been dismissed as overcautious by Madison. 20 minutes later, dispatch began receiving distress calls from drivers. The dashboard cameras in our trucks, another safety feature I'd implemented, live streamed the conditions. Whiteout visibility, roads becoming impassable, trucks sliding dangerously close to ditches. One by one, the GPS trackers showed vehicles stopping as drivers determined it was no longer safe to continue. 30 trucks, each carrying time-sensitive deliveries, stranded in a storm I had seen coming from my kitchen window. I didn't need to do anything. Sentinel was doing it all, logging the ignored warnings, archiving the Slack messages where Madison had dismissed concerns, even capturing a particularly ill-advised GIF she'd sent to the dispatch team. A cartoon character shrugging with the caption, "It's just a little snow." Among those stranded deliveries were insulin supplies for regional pharmacies, critical maintenance parts for hospital generators, and temperature-sensitive laboratory samples. The cost of these delays would far exceed any payroll savings from my termination. Strike 2. I received an email from Regina that afternoon. Evelyn, given the current weather situation affecting our operations, we would appreciate your insights on emergency protocols. This request does not constitute an employment offer or consulting arrangement, but is merely a courtesy inquiry. Please call my direct line at your earliest convenience. Regards, Regina Fletcher, Human Resources Director. I marked it as read and didn't respond. Let them consult the fresh perspectives they'd hired to replace me. 32 hours until failsafe 9. Day 3 began with the storm's aftermath and a media firestorm. Local news outlets had picked up on the stranded Northbridge trucks, particularly after a state trooper's dashcam footage went viral. It showed him rescuing one of our drivers who had attempted to walk for help after being stranded for 6 hours. What made the story particularly newsworthy was the cargo, diabetic supplies that hadn't reached their destinations. Patients across 3 counties were being advised to ration insulin until emergency shipments could arrive. By 10 a.m., the Federal Transportation Department had announced a suspension of Northbridge's medical transport certification pending investigation. Our largest pharmaceutical client had issued a statement reevaluating their logistics partnerships to ensure patient safety. Northbridge's stock price dropped 18% in the first hour of trading. I received another email, this time from Martin himself. Evelyn, we are facing an unprecedented situation and need your expertise immediately. I'm prepared to offer a consulting arrangement at triple your former salary for the next 30 days to help navigate this crisis. Please call me directly. This is urgent. Martin Geller, CEO, Northbridge Supply Co. I didn't respond to this either. Instead, I watched through my shadow monitor as Aiden and Madison frantically tried to access Sentinel's emergency protocols that were clearly documented in the operations manual they hadn't bothered to read. The costs were mounting by the hour. Emergency charter flights to deliver replacement medical supplies, $380,000. Overtime for recovery teams, $215,000. Contractual penalties for missed deliveries, $1.4 million, and counting. Legal teams mobilizing to address regulatory investigations, another $400,000. All to save $3,100 a month. 15 hours until failsafe 9. At exactly 72 hours after my termination, failsafe 9 activated. It wasn't dramatic. No flashing lights or alarm bells. Just a simple, automated process that compiled 3 days of operational data into comprehensive reports that were simultaneously delivered to Northbridge's executive team, legal department, and top-tier clients. The reports were factual, not accusatory. They simply documented what had occurred: route changes that violated temperature control protocols, weather warnings that were ignored, and the resulting consequences in plain, unembellished language. They also included performance assessments for both Aiden and Madison based on objective metrics. Aiden Whitmore, 28% compliance with established safety protocols. Madison Reynolds, 25% compliance with operational standards. Each assessment was accompanied by timestamps, decision logs, and outcomes. Within an hour of the report's delivery, my phone began ringing incessantly. Martin, Regina, board members I'd never spoken with directly, all suddenly desperate to reach me. I let every call go to voicemail. Meanwhile, the financial fallout continued. By mid-afternoon, Northbridge's stock had fallen 32% from its opening position 3 days earlier, erasing nearly $38 million in market value. The company was trending on Twitter, and not in a good way. Madison had deleted her LinkedIn profile after journalists began quoting her dismissive messages about the storm warnings. At 4 p.m., Martin held an emergency press conference. I watched it live, sipping tea in my living room as he stammered through prepared statements about unforeseen circumstances and temporary operational adjustments. When a reporter asked directly about my departure and whether it had contributed to the crisis, Martin visibly paled. Evelyn Barrett's retirement was a planned transition, he lied. These incidents are unrelated and could have happened under anyone's watch. Another reporter followed up. We have sources saying Ms. Barrett warned the company about insufficient training for her replacements. Can you confirm or deny those reports? There were no such sources. The reporter was fishing. But Martin's panicked expression spoke volumes. No comment at this time, he managed before his PR team abruptly ended the press conference. By evening, the damage control had begun in earnest. The board announced an emergency session. Aiden was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Madison had apparently left the building in tears after being confronted with her documented dismissal of safety protocols. And in my inbox, a different kind of message appeared. Dear Ms. Barrett, my name is Daniel Kwan, founder and CEO of Archetype Roots. We've been following your work at Northbridge with great admiration for years, particularly your development of the Sentinel system. Recent events have only confirmed what we already knew. Your expertise in logistics systems design is unparalleled. We would be honored to discuss the possibility of you joining Archetype Roots as our Chief Operations Strategist, leading the development of our next-generation AI-driven distribution platform. This would be a fully remote position with complete autonomy over your team and projects. Compensation would start at 2.5x your previous salary, with equity options and a 4-day workweek. If you're interested in exploring this opportunity, I'm personally available at your convenience for a preliminary conversation. With sincere respect, Daniel Kwan. I read the email twice, noting its tone of genuine respect and the transparency of its offer. No manipulative language, no desperation, just professional recognition of value. It was refreshing. I was composing a response when another call came through. Martin again. This time, I answered. Evelyn, thank God, we need you back here immediately. The situation is exactly what you created. I finished calmly. You replaced experience with inexperience to save pennies, and it cost you millions. That decision wasn't mine alone, he protested. The board pushed for cost-cutting measures, and HR identified your position as spare me the excuses, Martin. We both know what happened. A heavy sigh came through the line. What do you want, Evelyn? Name your price, triple your former salary. 10% equity stake, full control over Sentinel again. Just come back and fix this mess. For a brief moment, I savored the vindication. After decades of having my expertise undervalued, of watching younger, less qualified men get promoted above me, of fighting for resources and recognition, here was Martin Geller, the same man who had escorted me out without so much as a thank you, begging for my return. I have a counter offer, I said finally. Anything, he replied eagerly. I know a brilliant logistics specialist, Diana Mendez. She's 34, has 2 master's degrees, and has been overlooked for promotion at her current company because she doesn't fit their idea of executive material. Hire her instead. But we need you, your knowledge of our systems. I'll provide transition documentation and be available for occasional consulting calls at my standard rate of $500 per hour if Diana needs guidance, but only if you actually listen this time. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Martin. I'll have HR contact her immediately, he said finally, his voice tight with suppressed frustration. One more thing, I added. When you announce the leadership change, I want public acknowledgement of Aiden and Madison's errors and a commitment to valuing experience alongside innovation in your hiring practices. That's not standard corporate communications. Neither is losing $7 million in 3 days because you fired the wrong person. I countered, take it or leave it. Another long pause. Fine. After hanging up, I turned back to my computer and opened a new project file. It was time for Sentinel to evolve beyond Northbridge. I spent the evening extracting the core algorithms, my intellectual property, developed largely on my own time, and preparing them for a new life. 3 days later, as Northbridge's stock slowly recovered and Diana Mendez began her new role with surprisingly strong support from Martin, I made the final decision. I posted Sentinel's base code to an open-source repository with a simple message. For everyone who was ever undervalued simply because they dared to age, experience matters. That evening, Alice called after reading a Wall Street Journal article about the Northbridge fiasco. The headline read, Cost-cutting measure backfires, how saving $3,100 cost Northbridge Supply, Co. $7 million. You didn't just sit back and do nothing, did you? She asked, laughter in her voice. I didn't have to do anything, I replied truthfully. I just let them experience the consequences of their decision. And now, what's next for the logistics mastermind? I glanced at my calendar, where I'd scheduled a virtual coffee meeting with Daniel Kwan for the following morning. I'm considering my options. It turns out respect isn't too expensive after all. 6 months later, I sat in my home office, now equipped with dual monitors and a standing desk provided by Archetype Roots, finalizing the architecture for a next-generation logistics platform. My team of 8 developers, scattered across 3 continents, waited in our video conference for my input. The core principle, I explained, pointing to a diagram on my shared screen, is that algorithms alone aren't enough. We need to encode institutional knowledge and human judgment into the system. Like Sentinel did? Asked May, our lead AI specialist. Similar, but more advanced. Sentinel was reactive, identifying problems and suggesting solutions. This system will be proactive, anticipating issues before they materialize and learning from every decision. Speaking of learning, Daniel said, joining the call. Have you seen the latest industry report? I hadn't. Between leading Archetype's technology development and mentoring Diana at Northbridge, yes, I'd kept my promise to consult, at $500 per hour. I'd had little time for industry news. Daniel shared his screen, showing a logistics industry analysis. Northbridge dropped to 4th place in reliability rankings. Their on-time delivery rate is still suffering, even with Diana's improvements. She's fighting years of entrenched culture, I noted. Change takes time. And meanwhile, Daniel continued, scrolling to another page. Look who's rising fast. Archetype Roots had jumped to 2nd place in the reliability rankings, just behind the industry leader who'd held the top position for a decade. Our customer satisfaction scores were the highest in the sector. Not bad for a startup, I smiled. After the meeting, I checked my personal email and found a message from Madison Reynolds, the first contact since the debacle 6 months earlier. Mrs. Barrett, I hope this email finds you well. You probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to reach out. I made terrible mistakes at Northbridge. My overconfidence and dismissal of established protocols caused real harm. And I've spent months reflecting on that failure. After being let go, I was fortunate to find a junior operations position at a smaller company where my manager insists that I learn the business from the ground up. I've spent 3 months in the warehouse, 2 driving delivery routes, and now I'm finally being trained in dispatch, with careful supervision. It's humbling and exactly what I needed. I saw your open source release of Sentinel and have been studying the code to understand the principles behind it. The way you integrated human experience into algorithmic decision-making is brilliant. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you ever have time for a brief conversation about lessons learned, I would be incredibly grateful. Either way, thank you for indirectly teaching me the most important lesson of my career, that there is no substitute for experience and respect. Sincerely, Madison Reynolds. I considered the email for a long moment before replying. Madison, thank you for reaching out. The humility in your message suggests you've already learned the most important lesson. Expertise isn't about age or titles. It's about respect for what came before you and willingness to earn your knowledge through experience. I'd be happy to schedule a virtual coffee next week. There's always room in this industry for people who understand that innovation works best when it builds on foundation, not when it tries to replace it. Regards, Evelyn Barrett, Chief Operations Strategist, Archetype Roots. As I sent the reply, a notification appeared on my screen, an article from Business Insider. Northbridge announces restructuring. CEO Martin Geller steps down amid continued fallout from Fresh Perspectives disaster. I closed the browser without reading further. Martin's fate was no longer my concern. Instead, I opened the presentation I was preparing for next week's industry conference, The Human Algorithm: Why AI Can't Replace Experience in Critical Systems. My keynote would address the growing trend of companies discarding older workers in favor of younger, less expensive alternatives under the guise of digital transformation. Alice had been right 6 months ago. Being forced out of Northbridge had been a blessing in disguise. At Archetype, I worked fewer hours for better compensation, led a team that valued my input, and had the freedom to shape the future of logistics technology on my own terms. More importantly, I'd found my voice as an advocate for experienced professionals in an industry increasingly obsessed with youth and theoretical knowledge over practical wisdom. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. Saw the Northbridge news. Karma really is a patient accountant, isn't it? I smiled and replied, the best revenge isn't just success. It's creating a world where what happened to you can't happen to others. Then I turned back to my presentation, adding a new concluding slide with a simple message. The cost of disrespect is always higher than the price of recognition. Choose wisely. 1 year to the day after my termination from Northbridge, I stood at the podium of the International Logistics Innovation Summit, looking out at an audience of industry leaders, technology innovators, and operations specialists from around the world. The metrics are clear, I said, gesturing to the graph behind me. Companies that maintain a balanced workforce, blending experienced professionals with fresh graduates, consistently outperform those that skew too far in either direction. Experience without innovation leads to stagnation. Innovation without experience leads to costly mistakes. In the front row, Daniel nodded approvingly. Beside him sat Diana Mendez, now operations director at a restructured Northbridge under new leadership, and a few seats away, Madison Reynolds listened intently, taking notes. The Northbridge incident last year wasn't an anomaly. I continued. It was a predictable outcome of a pervasive attitude that values theoretical knowledge over practical wisdom, that sees age as a liability rather than an asset. I clicked to my final slide, a simple balance sheet. When Northbridge replaced me with two inexperienced managers, they calculated a monthly savings of $3,100. What they failed to calculate was the true cost: $7.2 million in direct losses, a 28% drop in stock value, the resignation of three executives, and incalculable damage to their reputation that continues to impact their business today. I paused, looking across the silent audience. But this isn't just about Northbridge or about me. It's about recognizing that in an age of algorithms and automation, human experience remains our most valuable resource. The most powerful AI systems are those that incorporate the wisdom of human experts, not those that try to replace them. After the presentation, as attendees mingled during the reception, I found myself approached by a familiar face, Aidan Whitmore. "Ms. Barrett," he said hesitantly, "I didn't know you would be speaking today." "And I didn't expect to see you in the audience," I replied evenly. He looked different, humbler, less polished, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of hard lessons learned. "I've been consulting for smaller logistics companies," he explained, "trying to rebuild my career after everything. Your talk today was illuminating." "And what did you learn from it?" I asked. He considered the question carefully. "That my degree taught me theories, but not wisdom. That I shouldn't have been so quick to dismiss protocols I didn't understand." He paused. "That the company and I both paid a high price for undervaluing your experience." I nodded, appreciating his candor. "And what will you do with that insight?" "I'm starting over," he said. "Working with a mentor who's been in the industry for 30 years, learning the business from the ground up, asking questions instead of making assumptions." "That's a good start." As Aidan moved away, Daniel approached with a woman I didn't recognize, tall, with silver-streaked hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Evelyn, I'd like you to meet Vivian Zhao, CEO of Global Med Express. They're interested in implementing our system for their international vaccine distribution network." I shook Vivian's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," she replied. "Your presentation resonated with me. We recently reversed course on a similar youth movement in our operations department after seeing what happened at Northbridge. Now we're focusing on knowledge transfer programs instead, pairing experienced staff with younger employees for mutual benefit." "A much wiser approach," I agreed. Later that evening, as Daniel and I shared a celebratory dinner with our executive team, he raised his glass. "To Evelyn, who turned determination into a revolution and saved us from making the same mistakes as Northbridge." I smiled. To valuing what truly matters, not just the cost on a balance sheet, but the worth of human experience. As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Archetype Roots secures $120 million Series B funding, valued at $1.2 billion after revolutionary logistics platform adoption. Beneath the headline was a quote from our lead investor. "What sets Archetype apart is their unique integration of human expertise into algorithmic decision-making, a philosophy that starts at the top with Chief Operations Strategist Evelyn Barrett." I put my phone away without showing it to the others. The validation was nice, but it wasn't what drove me anymore. What mattered was that I was creating something that respected both innovation and experience, a system that understood the value of human wisdom in a digital age. The true price of disrespect had been far higher than $3,100 for Northbridge. But for me, it had been the catalyst for something greater than I could have built had I remained. Sometimes being replaced is just the beginning of your most important work. 5 years after being escorted out of Northbridge Supply Co., I stood on a different stage, this time accepting the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Global Supply Chain Innovation Conference. The irony wasn't lost on me as I surveyed the audience of industry leaders, many of whom had implemented versions of the systems I'd pioneered. "Innovation isn't about discarding the old for the new," I said into the microphone, my voice stronger and more confident than it had ever been during my Northbridge days. "True innovation builds bridges between experience and fresh perspectives. It honors the past while creating the future." In the 5 years since my unceremonious dismissal, Archetype Roots had grown from a promising startup to an industry leader. Our logistics platform, built on Sentinel's open-sourced foundation but enhanced with collaborative intelligence features, had revolutionized how critical supplies moved around the world. During global crises, from hurricanes to pandemics, our system had ensured that life-saving resources reached their destinations when other supply chains failed. Daniel Kwan sat in the front row. Now my business partner rather than just my employer. We'd restructured the company 2 years ago, with me taking on the role of co-CEO focusing on technology strategy while he handled business development. The greatest lesson of my career came when I was told I was redundant, I continued, meeting the eyes of younger professionals scattered throughout the audience. It taught me that value isn't measured by salary or age or impressive degrees. It's measured by the wisdom you bring and your willingness to share it. I didn't mention Northbridge by name. I didn't need to. Their cautionary tale had become a business school case study. After Martin's departure, they'd struggled for years before being acquired by a larger competitor for a fraction of their former value. The company that had once been an industry leader had become a footnote in logistics history. Today, as I accept this award, I want to dedicate it to everyone who has ever been told they're too expensive, too old, or too set in their ways to contribute to innovation. Your experience isn't a liability. It's an irreplaceable asset. The applause that followed was gratifying, but not as meaningful as what came after the ceremony. A group of women in their 50s and 60s approached me, each with a story similar to mine, pushed aside for younger, cheaper replacements, only to be called back when systems began to fail. "You gave us a voice," one said, gripping my hand tightly. "And more importantly, you gave us a roadmap for fighting back without bitterness, by proving our worth instead of just claiming it." Later that evening, as I packed my award in my hotel room, I received an unexpected email from Aidan Whitmore. "Madel Barrett, or Evelyn, if I may. Congratulations on your well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award. Your speech today resonated deeply with me, as someone who once represented everything you cautioned against. I wanted to share some news. After years of learning the industry properly under mentorship, I've started a consulting practice focused on integrating AI advancements with established operational wisdom. Our tagline is, building on foundations, not replacing them. Words directly inspired by our brief interaction years ago. More importantly, we've implemented a unique staffing model where every project team must include at least one logistics professional with 20-plus years of experience. The results have been remarkable, both in project outcomes and in the knowledge transfer that occurs naturally in these collaborations. None of this would have happened if you hadn't indirectly taught me the most valuable lesson of my career through what happened at Northbridge. Sometimes the most powerful teaching comes from failure. With sincere respect and gratitude, Aidan Whitmore. I smiled as I closed the email. This was the true victory, not watching Northbridge stumble, but seeing the next generation learn from those mistakes. Even Aidan, who had once been the poster child for valuing theory over practice, had grown into someone who understood the importance of experience. My phone rang, Alice calling to congratulate me. "I watched the live stream," she said when I answered. "You were magnificent, a fitting capstone to an incredible career." "Who said anything about a capstone?" I laughed. "I'm just getting started." At 68, most people would be thinking about retiring, not launching new ventures. Most people haven't had the privilege of being fired for being too expensive at 63, I countered. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Alice chuckled. "Remember when they calculated they'd save $3,100 a month by replacing you? I wonder what the final tally on that decision came to." According to the Harvard Business School case study, approximately $112 million in direct losses, market devaluation, and opportunity costs over 3 years. I couldn't help the satisfaction that crept into my voice. Not a great return on investment. "The best revenge is living well," Alice said. "It's not about revenge," I corrected her. "It's about redefining value." Tomorrow I'm announcing Archetype's new initiative, a fellowship program for logistics professionals over 50 who want to transition into AI and advanced systems design. Another disruption to the industry's youth obsession? Just good business sense, I said. Experience is the one resource you can't manufacture or accelerate. It has to be earned day by day, crisis by crisis, and we're going to harness it before more companies discard it for short-term savings. After hanging up, I stood at the hotel window overlooking the city lights. 5 years ago, I had sat in my car outside Northbridge, hands shaking with rage and humiliation as security watched to ensure I left the premises. Tonight, I held an award acknowledging my lifetime of contributions to an industry I'd helped transform. The true price of Northbridge's decision to replace me hadn't just been the immediate financial losses or the damaged reputation. It had been the loss of an opportunity to bridge generations, to create something more powerful by combining experience with fresh energy rather than pitting them against each other. Their $3,100 monthly savings had cost them everything. But their loss had become my greatest opportunity, and ultimately, a chance to change an entire industry's perspective on the value of experience. Sometimes being replaced is the beginning of finding your true worth. And sometimes, the real price of short-sighted decisions isn't paid in dollars, but in lost potential for everyone involved. As I turned from the window, my phone buzzed with a notification from Archetype's monitoring system. Our platform had just successfully rerouted emergency medical supplies around an unexpected hurricane, ensuring they would reach hospitals without delay. The AI had made the initial calculations, but it was the embedded expertise, the accumulated wisdom of decades of logistics experience that had fine-tuned the solution. Innovation built on experience, the future honoring the past. This was my legacy, far greater than anything I could have accomplished had I remained at Northbridge until a quiet, unremarkable retirement. They had replaced me to save $3,100 a month. And in doing so, they had inadvertently launched me into creating something priceless. The following morning, as I prepared to announce Archetype's fellowship program at a press conference, Madison Reynolds, now a respected operations specialist in her own right, stopped by my hotel suite. "I brought you something," she said, handing me a small package. It seemed appropriate. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden plaque with an inscription. "The true cost of wisdom is the patience to acquire it. The true cost of disrespect is losing it when you need it most." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely touched. "Though I'm surprised you'd want to commemorate that chapter of your career." Madison smiled ruefully. "That failure was the best education I ever received, more valuable than my MIT degree or any promotion since." She paused. "You know, I mentor young logistics graduates now. The first thing I tell them is to find someone with decades of experience and listen more than they talk." Wise advice from someone who learned it the hard way. "We all did," she acknowledged. "Northbridge, Aiden, me. We all paid a steep price for that lesson. But you're the only one who managed to transform it into something revolutionary." As we walked together toward the conference hall, I reflected on the journey of the past 5 years. The anger that had once burned so hot had long since cooled, replaced by something more constructive, a determination to change how industries viewed their most experienced employees. "Do you ever regret not going back when Martin begged you to?" Madison asked as we waited for the elevator. "Not for a second," I replied without hesitation. Sometimes doors need to close permanently before you can see the better ones waiting to be opened. The press conference was packed, not just with technology and business reporters, but with industry veterans curious about our fellowship program. As I took the podium, I saw faces in the audience that spanned generations, from recent graduates to professionals with silver hair and decades of wisdom etched into their expressions. "At Archetype Roots," I began, "we believe that the future of logistics, and indeed of any complex system, lies not in artificial intelligence alone, but in collaborative intelligence, the seamless integration of human experience with computational power." I unveiled the details of our fellowship, a year-long paid program for logistics professionals over 50, training them to work alongside AI systems as experienced architects, the human wisdom behind the algorithms. For too long, our industry has operated under the false assumption that innovation comes only from youth, that experience is a liability rather than an asset. Today, we're not just challenging that assumption. we're providing an alternative model that proves the extraordinary power of intergenerational collaboration. The questions afterward were thoughtful, probing beyond the usual business concerns to the philosophy underlying our approach. One reporter asked the question I'd been anticipating. Ms. Barrett, is this fellowship a direct response to your experience at Northbridge 5 years ago? I smiled. Everything we do is shaped by our experiences, both positive and negative. What happened at Northbridge taught me a valuable lesson about how our industry undervalues wisdom. But this fellowship isn't about looking backward. It's about creating a future where no company makes the mistake of discarding their most valuable resource, the irreplaceable knowledge that comes only through years of hands-on experience. After the press conference, as I checked my messages, I found one from Diana Mendez, who had successfully guided Northbridge through its acquisition and now held a senior position with the parent company. Evelyn, I just watched your fellowship announcement. It's brilliant and exactly what our industry needs. I've already spoken with our CEO about becoming a corporate sponsor and establishing a pipeline for our experienced team members to participate. On a personal note, I wanted to share that the operations manual you created, the one you handwrote during the pandemic, has been digitized and is now required reading for every new hire in our logistics division. Your insights continue to guide us daily, even as we evolve. With admiration. Diana. I smiled at the irony. The same company that had once escorted me out without so much as a thank you was now requiring new employees to study my work. Life had a way of coming full circle. That evening, at a small dinner celebrating the fellowship launch, Daniel raised his glass in a toast. To Evelyn, who turned a $3,100 monthly saving into a multi-billion-dollar revolution. I shook my head, amending his toast as I raised my own glass. To experience, the one investment that always yields returns. As conversations flowed around me, I found myself thinking about the frightened, angry woman who had sat in her car 5 years ago, wondering what would become of her after being discarded like obsolete equipment. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her that the end of one path was merely the beginnings of a better one, that sometimes being replaced is the first step toward becoming irreplaceable. The true price of Northbridge's decision hadn't been paid in dollars and cents, stock valuation, or damaged reputation. The true price had been the lost opportunity to harness the power that comes from bridging generations, from honoring experience while embracing innovation. It was a price they couldn't afford. But, for me, it had been the catalyst for something far more valuable than job security or a comfortable retirement. It had given me the chance to transform an industry's understanding of worth, to create a model where experience was valued as the precious resource it truly is. Sometimes the best revenge isn't success. It's creating a world where what happened to you can't happen to others. A world where wisdom is recognized not as an expense to be cut, but as an investment that pays immeasurable dividends. They had replaced me at 63 to save $3,100. The real price, for them, had come 72 hours later. But for me, the real value had emerged in the 5 years since. A revolution built on the simple truth that experience matters. That wisdom earned through decades of solving real-world problems is the foundation upon which true innovation must be built. Not a bad return on their investment after all.